salt, this tiny and ordinary crystal, exhausts its power, transforms into various forms, and is stored on Earth. It is a resource humans rely on for survival and carries the light of human wisdom. We embark on a journey, following the footprints of salt as we traverse the continents of Africa, Asia, Europe, and America. Along the way, we transcend regional boundaries, immersing ourselves in the fascinating history of salt. Through this exploration, we witness the profound interdependence that exists between humans and the Earth. The stories that emerge from the amalgamation of cruelty, courage, and strength give rise to deeply moving tales of human-nature interplay. This is the story that binds salt and earth together, encapsulating the essence of life itself. It is the story of salt's indispensable role in sustaining life. In the charming seaside town of Cervia, Italy, the annual horse racing event unfolds as scheduled. Letizia Magnani breaks away from her usual routine after work.
I'm really a star now.
There is a special event at the racetrack today.
Non devo uscire, devo andare a fare la diretta TV. Di a Giuseppe che ho dei problemi col parcheggio, non mi fanno andare e questo è un problema.
All'ippodromo del Savio di Cesena, in questa bellissima serata un po' calda, che sono molto importanti. Allora, Letizia, questo libro, il primo.
Il presidente della Salina di Cervia mi ha chiesto di lavorare sulla storia, sull'identità, sui valori della Salina di Cervia, non solo dal punto di vista della comunicazione, ma anche per raccontare a tutti questa grande storia, questa grande avventura. E l'abbiamo fatto facendo una grande ricerca storica, anche perché mi sono resa conto, facendo ricerca, che mancava in Italia un libro sulla storia del sale.
We all know that salt tastes salty. Ms. Letizia Magnani, who lives in Cervia, Italy, likes to describe salt as sweet. Her book on salt is entitled Sweet Like Salt. Salt from Cervia does have a unique charm. Say, Parma ham cured with this salt boasts a flavour no other hams can match.
Gustoso ma molto molto dolce.
Grazie.
Prego, arrivederci.
Grazie.
Grazie Fabio, sempre a disposizione. Ciao, grazie, arrivederci.
Many things in Cervia are closely related to salt. This flower of salt the Italians are proud of comes from the Cervia salt pans. Compared with other kinds of sea salt, it tastes mild, soft, and has a sweet aftertaste. Sweet like salt is about this sweet salt in Italy. Letizia Magnani, the author, is a local scholar. She also serves as a publicity officer for the Cervia Salt Works. The past history of salt always comes back to her and becomes words in her book. At the entrance of the Colosseum in Rome, Italy, these Roman soldiers, taking photos with tourists, seem to be a constant reminder that the glory of the Roman Empire resulted from war and force. All roads lead to Rome. These official roads to Rome, built by the state, were actually salt roads, stretching from Rome all the way to the Adriatic. On this road, merchants drove ox carts laden with salt blocks to support the running of the mighty Roman Empire. Relying on salt, the Roman legions from this road went to conquer the world. Time has left deep marks on the road, silently telling us that period of history. Rome was also an empire made of salty salt. In ancient Rome, soldiers received a portion of their pay in salt. At that time, salt was money. People called it salary money. The word salary in modern English derived from salt. In ancient Rome, wealth was not judged by how much gold, but how much salt one owned.
La storia del sale è molto interessante perché racconta la storia di tutti noi, la storia umana, ed è una storia che ha a che fare con il potere. Naturalmente tutta la storia del sale è legata alla storia, nel senso che il sale era un bene talmente prezioso che veniva chiamato l'oro bianco, the gold white.
Ancient Rome kept expanding. Expansion entailed war. For over a century, from 264 to 146 BC, 3 major wars took place between ancient Rome and Carthage, a powerhouse in North Africa, for the hegemony of the Mediterranean. This stretched government finances to the limit.
L'impero romano ha basato la sua potenza su alcuni fattori, fra cui anche l'aver detenuto il monopolio della produzione e del commercio del sale. È molto importante questo aspetto perché appunto l'impero romano ha capito che il commercio del sale e la sua produzione potevano essere fondamentali per la propria economia.
At this time, the state started manipulating the salt price and raising the salt tax to support the huge military expenditure. The high salt tax helped the Romans secure the final victory, thus creating a glorious empire spanning Europe, Asia, and Africa.
Il monopolio della produzione del sale in Italia e in tutto il territorio del suo impero, quindi anche per esempio in Nord Africa, ma è stato molto importante per l'impero romano anche detenere il monopolio delle vie del commercio. Le vie del commercio che sono state sia strade.
During the expansion of their territory, the Romans constructed salterns extensively across the Italian peninsula, encompassing coastal areas, marshes, and brine springs. This development took place around 102 BC, when ancient Rome transformed from a republic to an empire. Subsequently, the city entered an era characterized by imperial rule, with salt playing an undeniable role as the foundation for the empire's expansion. Of course, that was an old story. For today's Italy, salt is obviously not that important anymore. Between games, a commercial for Cervia's sea salt was repeatedly broadcast on the large screen. This is a partially state-owned, semi-privatized sea salt works. It awards a basket of sea salt, known as the Pope's Salt, to the winner. After the book launch, Letizia Magnani is in a good mood. She bets on horse number 2. This horse-driven game is more traditional, similar to human race walking. The horse cannot have all 4 hooves off the ground at the same time. Horse number 2, Magnani bet on, takes the lead in the first lap, but is out in the second. This does not affect Magnani at all. Today, she has another role. On behalf of the Jockey Club sponsor, the Cervia Salt Works, she will present the prize to the winning horses. Facing the galloping horses, as the hooves thunder on the ground and roll past her like a gust of wind, what stirs in her heart are the battle scenes of the Roman Empire she describes in her book. Since the day salt was mined, it had been closely linked to the fate of empires. Salt has been the lifeblood determining the rise and fall of countless nations. In the distant East, when did countries begin monopolizing salt? Shandong Province, situated on Asia's eastern coast in China, holds the distinction among archaeologists as Asia's oldest sea salt origin. China leads the world in per capita salt consumption. In Shandong, the locals' affinity for pickled vegetables is readily apparent. Xu Wencheng lives in Shouguang, Shandong Province. Like all Shandong people, spring onions dipped in soybean sauce is his family's favorite. Xu Wencheng has spent his life making sauce and still cannot get enough of it. This is the sauce factory where Xu Wencheng spent his youth. He's the workshop director in this factory. He is very dedicated to his work, listening to the weather forecast at 6 every morning. If the weather forecast says it'll be raining, he'll cover all the jars before it rains. All kinds of vegetables meet salt here. Change over time and become a tasty sauce with pickles. Salt kills bacteria. Also, when the saltiness fuses with amino acids from decomposing food, it creates flavors that excite the palate. Xu Wencheng sticks to the ancient recipe of 3 liters of beans and 5 of salt, and quietly waits for the harvest. A few days later, another batch of pickles is ready. Sauce is cheap and a unique derivative of salt in northern China. Whether to maintain or improve one's life, salt is essential. Tracing the history of ancient China, as early as in the Shang dynasty, salt gradually became the lifeblood of the state. A decade ago, in Shouguang, Xu Wencheng's hometown in Shandong, some interesting pottery was unearthed. It looks like a pottery pot, but the bottom is pointed. It is a bit like a bucket for water, but without the holes to attach a rope. White sediment was found inside the pottery. Laizhou Bay in Shandong, being near the sea, is rich in sea salt. It has been an important place of salt production since ancient times. Could this object be related to salt production?
This is松的，蟹松。
哟，很完整的东西啊。
这个高的话大体有多少？
就高有25公分左右。
25公分。
对，直径的话有20、21、20这样的，很完整，里面还有白垢哈。
应该像上中期的。
是应该上在的，对。就当时主研工具嘛，是吧？这样放在灶上，弄上卤水就要煮。
Immediately afterwards, salt production sites were unearthed one after another. There are stove rooms for boiling salt, salt wells for storing brine, and helmet-shaped vessels. Each stove room is over 40 square meters and can hold over 200 helmet-shaped vessels.
像双王城这样规模大的盐遗址群呢，同时共存的有100个盐灶，也就是说，每一次煮盐呢能生产5万斤，肯定是有一个国家、有个政府来控制。
This is not a rushed conclusion. From traces in the soil layers, each stove room had a roof supported by several wooden pillars, and these pillars were quite large in diameter, about 35 centimeters, impossible to source near the sea, and must have been transported from far away by order of the government. This discovery is from more than 2,000 years ago. During this season, there was little rain. With the sun shining, seawater evaporated rapidly. This was the peak season for sea salt production. At this moment, an ordinance from the capital stopped workers from what they were doing. It said, in the year, during the best season for boiling brine, people were forbidden to make salt without permission. Salt produced by the people would be bought and sold by the government. Otherwise, it would be considered smuggling. After that, the government gradually organized the salt workers by the sea to expand production. This large salt production relics show that, in the ancient East, over 2,000 years ago, salt, as a scarce resource, was controlled by the government's hand. Krakow, the former capital of Poland, founded in 700 AD, used to be the political and economic center of Poland. Visitors will always come to this spot.
The people are at the moment actually doing some exercises, so you will see.
A 20-minute walk down steep stairs and a long passageway leads to a magnificent chapel. Everyone will give an exclamation of surprise. The chapel, 10 meters high, 54 meters long, and 18 meters at the widest point, is not on the ground. It's located 101 meters deep in the ground. Patterned square tiles on the floor. Chandeliers as crystal clear as gems hang from the dome. Da Vinci's Last Supper. The statue of the Virgin Mary and reliefs of biblical stories were all carved out of salt. Completed in 1890, these works of art took 3 miners 67 years to chisel in the deep ground. No statue was placed here after being finished. Rather, they were carved into the salt from the very beginning. Actually, this is just one of the chapels hidden deep in the Wieliczka salt mine. There are 40 in total. This salt mine is really huge. It has 9 floors, reaching a depth of 327 meters. It has over 2,400 rooms, extending nearly 300 kilometers. Here we have restaurants, a post office, a movie theatre, and a health resort. In the early 19th century, Polish salt industry scholars were surprised to find that miners who had suffered from lung disease and asthma, after several years of working in the salt mine, were miraculously cured. So, the world's first underground lung disease treatment centre was established here. This salt mine rehabilitation and treatment has been preserved to this day. These days, to keep the interior of the salt mine dry, 15,000 tons of salt is mined here every year. Hundreds of years later, Barbara, a Pole in her 60s, buys fresh ingredients together with her daughter and grandson, ready to invite old friends over for a traditional Polish meal. This is a sauerkraut, made by mixing and pickling minced meat, cabbage and sausage. And for pickles, adding salt is a crucial step. The old friend who is coming today is notoriously picky about food. Barbara spares no effort. This is bigos. Bigos means to mix everything together in Polish. The Poles have a colloquial expression. Even if there are only 2 Poles, there will be 3 ways of cooking bigos. Although a bit exaggerated, it vividly tells that almost every Pole has his or her own way of cooking sauerkraut. How much salt to add, what ingredients to use will influence the taste.
Sól powoduje właśnie wytwarzanie się kwasu i konserwację i w ten sposób kapusta uzyskuje specyficzny, kwaśny smak.
Mix the ingredients, put it in the fridge, freeze 3 times and melt 3 times. Of course, Barbara cooks bigos with salt from the Wieliczka salt mine. It is said that, in the 14th century, the purity of the salt produced here was over 95%. Many European nobles even consumed it directly. At that time, salt was as expensive as gold. Of course, salt belonged to generations of Polish monarchs. This is the most famous and greatest monarch in Polish history. There's a saying, when he ascended the throne, Poland was made of wood, and ended up made of stone. The salt mine is like a hen that keeps laying golden eggs, contributing over 30% of the Kingdom of Poland's income. The rise of the Polish kingdom in Europe in the Middle Ages is owed entirely to the salt of Wieliczka.
Chyba wszystkie.
Nasolony, dopieprzony.
Pieprzu by chyba jeszcze przyjął, ale wydaje mi się...
Joazia, the daughter, recalls when she attended university away from home, every time she came home, she'd eat bigos her mother cooked, a tasty dish by mum for her daughter. The guests have different comments. Every visitor writes something before leaving. Wieliczka is an old state salt mine. Hundreds of years later, when Poles taste delicacies cooked with Wieliczka salt, they remember the glory the salt mine brought to Poland, as well as those miners who spent their lives carving passageways into palaces of art in the dark and damp underground. At 7 a.m., on a mountain 1 kilometer away from his home, Tulu Hong takes a stone. This has become a routine for him and villagers nearby. The stones the sheep are licking, of course, are not ordinary. They are chunks of salt that contain various minerals. In winter, sheep lick salt to increase their appetite and cope with the frigid weather. Such rock salt comes from Wensu Ancient Salt Mountain in southern Xinjiang, China. Wensu Ancient Salt Mountain is the only salt rock mine in China. We can see a salt-karst landscape. Salt crystals are brownish red, jagged like sharp knives. Due to the perennial rainfall, a marvelous salt grotto formed inside the salt mountain. Stalactite-shaped salt flowers hang in the depths of the cave, less than 1 meter high. Once, hundreds of millions of years ago, there was an ocean in place of the salt mountain. Conservatively, there are 30 billion tons of salt here. Everyone consumes 5 kilograms of salt per year. 6 billion people in the world, 30 billion kilograms a year. The salt from this mountain can satiate the world's population for 1,000 years. With a loud explosion, salt chunks roll down the cliff. These salt chunks will be sent to the salt works, where they'll be smashed and processed into either industrial salt or table salt. In Xinjiang cuisine, the delicacy using salt is pure and simple. When baking naan, add some salt when kneading the dough. Without any other seasoning, the naan will taste salty, yummy, and crispy. Today, salt, which is readily accessible, in the past was extremely valuable. With the state monopoly in China, the quantity of salt mined and produced, as well as the price, was determined by the government. This system began in the Han Dynasty. As we all know, Emperor Wu of Han managed to make the country prosperous and stable. He repelled the Xiongnu in the north, pacified civil outbreaks. During his reign, the Han Dynasty reached its political apex. In addition, there is a story about the economy that helps explain the strength of the Han Dynasty. In ancient Chinese culture, the traditional Chinese character for salt is explained as follows. A minister is watching, while a man keeps stirring the brine. In the lower part, a vessel for boiling salt is placed on the fire. During the period of Emperor Wu of Han, the state's salt monopoly reached its most stringent level. Before the state monopoly on salt and iron existed, the salt price was about 300. After the state monopoly was established, it more than tripled. Under the state monopoly, the wealth rolled in. (119 BC). Emperor Wu of Han, with deep pockets, launched the decisive battle against the Xiongnu in the Gobi Desert, routing them. Emperor Wu of Han repelled the Xiongnu in the north, beat Dayuan in the west, defeated Baiyue in the south, and made an expedition to Korea, all financed by salt. However, what that means is that the government was continuously exploiting the people. In his later years, Emperor Wu of Han was well aware of this. While the country grew into a giant, the people were suffering and dying. During the late days of Emperor Wu of Han, in the dazzlingly glowing country, the people could hardly survive and revolted frequently. In the late Han Dynasty, different government interest groups took notice of salt's value. One proposed the state monopoly on salt and iron over the years had maintained absolute control over salt. That was Sang Hongyang, the Minister of Finance, while Huo Guang advocated for a laissez-faire policy, or rule through non-action. 87 BC. Before his death, Emperor Wu of Han made an arrangement for his son. He appointed Sang Hongyang, the Minister of Finance, as Imperial Secretary, and Huo Guang as Dasima Da Jiangjun, or General, and commissioned them to assist 8-year-old Emperor Zhao. In February 81 BC, Huo Guang issued a call for over 60 scholars from all over the country to debate with Sang Hongyang about the state monopoly on salt and iron. Huo Guang and his followers criticized the monopoly on salt and iron as a state abuse of power forcing the people into destitution. But Sang Hongyang raised a question that lingered for many, many years. Without the state monopoly, how could a central authority be maintained? How could the country stay strong? The debate lasted 5 months. Both sides held different opinions. Neither side could be convinced. "30 years later, the minutes of the meeting were published as a book. This book is the famous The Discourses on Salt and Iron. The salt policy proposed by Sang Hongyang led to the hegemony of Emperor Wu of Han, but he himself attracted much hatred. Someone cursed him that if Sang Hongyang were boiled in water, it would rain immediately. This turned out to be a prophecy. In the end, this powerful historical figure was really boiled in water by Huo Guang, his political opponent. The fight over salt, in fact, is the fight over the fate of the country. Today, French steak is a major delicacy in Western cuisine and is popular across the world. However, many people do not know that the key to cooking this steak is a special salt. The steak, when cooked, is no different from other steaks. But sprinkle this salt on it without any further cooking, it will give off an unusual violet fragrance. This magic salt comes from Guérande, France. 1 kilogram of Guérande salt costs as much as 300 RMB, or $43, more than 10 times that of ordinary salt. Guérande, a small town on the Brittany Peninsula in northwestern France. A Mediterranean current passes through here all year round, providing a mild climate and abundant sunshine, the exact prerequisites for producing high-quality table salt. Sea salt can be harvested only from June to October every year. The sea breeze and sunshine at that time determine the rate of crystallization and the taste of the salt. Marie Aumont has lived in this town for generations. She works quite differently from her ancestors. Today, as usual, she drives to the salt pans to harvest salt. At 11 a.m., the sunshine is at its best of the day. At this time, the temperature of the brine can hit 37 degrees Celsius. The brine evaporates rapidly. Translucent white crystals form on the surface, like thin ice. Hence the name Guérande Fleur de Sel. The flowers floating on the salt pans are particularly delicate, vulnerable to dew, and must be collected before being atomized by the hot air.
C'est un sel qui va aussi aller avec les légumes, pour tout ce qui est légumes à la crocoselle, les petites tomates à la crocoselle ou autre. Donc un sel très friable, récolté en petite quantité quand même, parce que on va peut-être récolter 2 kilos sur une unité, ce qu'on appelle l'œillet, par jour. Donc comme on dit souvent, la fleur de sel c'est capricieux.
Marie carefully collects flowers of salt with a beach rake and places it in a wooden container. After the water has naturally drained away, no further refinement or cleaning is needed. It is ready to hit the market. In the past, salt harvesting was the only source of income for the women in Guérande. With the money earned, they added to their dowries. So Guérande Fleur de Sel was given a more poetic name, Bride's Salt.
Les salines, ce sont de la propriété privée telle qu'on la connaît en France, hein, comme toutes les terres. Moi, je suis propriétaire de la majorité de mes salines.
Today, Marie's saltern covers almost 4 hectares, with about 48 salt ponds for production. But in French history, from the time of Louis XIV to Louis XVI, salterns, like those in Guérande, belonged to the French royal family. Grigory, who is playing the cello, is a history teacher in Arc-et-Senans in France. He is an expert on the 17th century French monarchy. In his view, the history of that period is inextricably linked to salt.
Alors, pour le sel, dans le royaume de France jusqu'à la Révolution, viennent le récupérer de l'autre côté pour pouvoir le vendre sans taxe.
The high salt price forced more and more people to take risks and become smugglers. Every year, over 3,000 people were executed for smuggling salt, and many children were sent to prison. Tyranny prompted revolts. In Western France, one of the slogans chanted by 40,000 armed peasants was, "Long live the king without salt tax." The social conflict caused by salt smuggling hastened the French Revolution. A diary of Louis XVI is kept in the National Archives of France. On the day the people stormed the Bastille, Louis XVI wrote in his diary, "Nothing happened today." People always portray Louis XVI as a despot, a tyrant who ignored state affairs and lived an extravagant life, spending money like water. He was busy designing locks or other mechanical devices every day. The old-style guillotine could not kill people at once, and he thought it inhumane. So he changed the blade that was originally parallel to the ground into a slope as it is now. When the blade fell, decapitation was almost certain. Louis XVI was guillotined. It is said that the king was not as timid and anxious as one might expect. Maybe with death looming, he finally had the chance to reflect on his life. Facing the guillotine he had updated, he was surprisingly calm. Today, 230 years after the French Revolution, the salt pans of Guérande are no longer owned by the state. Instead, by Marie, the descendant of a salt worker. The annual Guérande Harvest Festival is taking place here. This local tradition is preserved thanks to the revenue from Guérande salt.
En Bretagne, il faut tout garder, hein. Donc les roi qui est tiré du tracteur ici.
As the former president of the Salt Workers Union, Marie organized the previous events. This is the first year after she left that position. She wants to enjoy this rare leisure. At this moment, Guérande salt is a common seasoning, always available on the table, and Marie's property is an integral part of her enjoying her life and work. On the table, salt stimulates one's taste buds. While in history, it shook the world. Today, in most parts of the world, salt monopolies have ended. Salt, in an increasingly health-conscious world today, has become a basic necessity and is more integrated than ever in people's lives. As time goes by, history flows past. Only salt settles down, silently revealing one salty story after another.